we get to a sermon in a minute, but I want to talk about some things, about churchy things first. On Friday, we had a funeral here for Anita Walden, who is beloved by this church. And it was really, it was packed in here. It was like people standing. It was amazing to see that many folks show up for Anita. And and I just want to talk about one thing that's different about then and now. And most people wouldn't have noticed it, but at the funeral, the baptismal font was as far back as it could go to make room for the coffin, which made its way up there. And the coffin is placed usually here. If we have more space up here, it would be sideways, and then there's the paschal candle there. And so the symbolism in that is that from baptism to resurrection, we are in God. We are in Christ, right? And that's just a little piece of liturgical symbolism that you have. And so this morning we have a baptism. The font is up front, so that the family and everybody can be up front, and we can keep dating and everything. But the imagery is still the same. It's the beginning of a journey which always goes towards the paschal candle, which symbolizes the resurrection and life of Christ. And so it's a subtle change as to what's happening in the church, but it's one that usually is present in all times and places in churches that celebrate these things. And the head, of course, faces this way and the feet this way, because you're moving this way, right? Now, if we're a really high church, we'd process out with the paschal candle, which I would lead all the way up to the hearse. And then usually the pastor would lead the hearse to the funeral, to the cemetery, and then the body would follow. And even if that's a military funeral, the pastor always leads. It's a recognition of, okay, we've taken care of this person up until this point, and now the person's in God's hands. So just a little bit of what's going on with things in the church and how they move around, and if you were paying attention. Because magically the font was up here when I came here this morning, and I didn't have to move it, so I was like, wow, thank God. It's pretty cool. So, okay, enough of that. And so you see what's going on there. We hear about Jesus in the temple this morning. It's one of my favorite readings, and for a lot of different reasons. But I want to talk about kids first, because we have baptism this morning. We all love kids, and they're cute. They say the craziest things, and I'll share you something that my daughter shared with me the other day. We were driving up to my wife's church in Nutley, and on the parkway, you drive with a huge cemetery on the right side, right? It's just this sprawling, mausoleum. It's in the park, yeah. You're maybe even driving over people, sadly. And my daughter Tilly says, this is one of the things kids said, she goes, Papa, when we die, we turn into stones. And I was like, yeah, sort of. It's really cute, But kids say the craziest stuff, right? Why not? They just don't know what they're different. But sometimes kids do really amazing things. Like if there are people fighting at school, which happens. We all in the school, people fight, people don't want to share, whatever. And the kid will say, aren't we just supposed to love each other? Right? Something simple. Like, why don't we just love each other? Or, sometimes if there's a family argument and the kid's watching the mom and dad or whatever coupling it is get in an argument, the kid will be, why don't you just get along with one another? They don't understand. They are right? What really in the end can separate us from each other? And so kids say things all the time that adults just freely accept, and they're like, yeah, or you're like, that doesn't make any sense, you're a kid, you don't know what you're talking about, or, that's ideological, right? That'll never work in the real world, right? Because we should just fight each other, an eye for an eye and all that, and the whole world's blind. But I think what's really fascinating about this reading from Luke's Gospel this morning is, first of all, it gives us a glimpse of a Jesus who's 12, right? Which we don't get a lot of. He would have been bar mitzvahed at 13, and so he's still not an adult, he's a kid. And so here's Jesus in the temple talking, and what's remarkable about it is he's with the teachers and the elders and the scribes and the Pharisees, right? They're all there, and they love what he has to say. They love it. They're amazed by his wisdom. They're just sitting there listening to this boy, Jesus, the Son of God, preaching and teaching and asking questions and probably even challenging people in the temple. And they love him. And so I have to ask, what changed? Because these are the same folks who later say, we have to have him arrested, we have to have him crucified, we have to have him killed. So what changed? Could be. I would like to posit that it's similar to the way we treat kids. Because kids say, why can't we all just get along? Why can't we just love one another? Why can't we just forgive one another? And we all love it because it's kids saying it. We don't have to do anything about it. Like, wow, that's so sweet and heartwarming, you know? Then Jesus grows up, and we have to say that Jesus didn't change, right? He's the same kid, just older. He says, love your enemies. Love the stranger. Forgive one another. The greatest thing you can do for someone is to lay down your life for them. So what changed? Why was it cute and nice when it was like little kid Jesus, and then he grows up, and then we're like, put him on a cross. Get him out of my face. That's not going to work in this world. We're talking about real-world solutions to real-world problems. Right?
Now he's not a cute little kid.
Now he's not a cute little kid anymore. I think it also has something to do with we can say it's cute and admire it from afar when we actually don't have to do anything about it. Because what Jesus calls us to as a kid and as an adult is quite simple. And he summarizes it. Love your neighbor as yourself. Love one another as I have loved you. Sounds great. You know, we could make a bumper sticker out of that. It sounds easy, but it's so hard. It's so dangerous. Because we know what happens when you say, love your enemy now. We know what they did to Martin Luther King Jr. when he was loving the Vietnamese, right? And when you assert equal rights for your enemies, well, then you got a problem. But when you love strangers, when you love neighbors even, if someone comes to my house, and they're like, oh, can I have a cup of sugar? I'm like, I've got the phone in one hand with ready to dial 911. It's just like, is that the world we live in? It is. Is that how it's supposed to be? Probably not. And so something changes, and I'll tell you what, it's not Jesus who changed, it's adults. Our kids grow up and they teach us so much wisdom, such simplicity. And we always write it off as impractical, foolish, or they just don't know. When a kid grows up and they espouse the same love ethic as they have when they're young, they're hippies, they're crazy, they're not going to make it in the real world, We've got to be mean to make it in the world, we've got to be tough. But Jesus, as a boy, says all these things, and the elders, and the teachers, and the Pharisees, they all love it. Because it's cute. We have to assume he says the same thing later, which lands him on a cross for us. And so that love ethic that he espouses is really difficult. And it's really hard not to just push it aside and say, well, that can't work here for me, in this place, in this context, in this time, in this neighborhood, in this church, in this world. But it's a simple love ethic. It's just dangerous as heck. It's dangerous. But that's who Jesus is, and that's who he calls us to be, and that's the love that he invites us to model in this world, trusting, having faith in him, that if we actually did, this world would be better. That's what faith is. It's, of course, faith in Jesus Christ, the Son of God, and faith in the fact that the life he lived will actually change the world for the better. And I might get derided for it, and I might get threatened for it. Heck, I've been threatened for it. But that's the life he's called us to live. That's what a little water and some words this morning at baptism are all about. It's that thing that you hopefully can remember when you're in the ditch. Think God's with you. God's got you. From all the way back there, all the way up there, and then all the way up there, God's got you. That's what faith is. It's not just in faith in a person, it's a faith in a way of life that actually does transform the world. And I've seen it. We've seen it with Operation Warmark, with volunteers telling people to go away, right? Oh my God, what are we going to do with all these clothes? How are we going to feed all these homeless people? I don't know. It's like cloudy with a chance of meatballs in the social hall. It's just always raining food. I mean, there's so much of it. Because people want to be good. It's easier to call people bad. It's easier to just brush people aside. It's easier to just be done with someone and forget about them and never forgive them. It's harder to forgive. But people like it more. And some people today just don't think it's possible to forgive, to love. But it is. It'll change you. It'll change the world. And Jesus said that's how people are going to know who we are. By our love for one another. Not our hate. Not how long we can hold a grudge. But by our love. And when I hear Jesus and I hear this story, and I can only imagine what he said and what questions they might have asked him. And what answers he must have given that just blew them away. And then later in life, they hate him. They hate him because he hangs out with lepers. They hate him because he hangs out with drunks. They hate him because he hangs out with prostitutes. They hate him because he hangs out with Samaritans. And yet all the while, God just keeps marching on. Jesus keeps going and going and going and going. Forgiving adulterers. Tax collectors. And then his disciples keep going. The eunuch, like this guy had no place in the church. Wise men show up at his birth. Not Jews, not Christians, pagans. Shepherds get the first announcement that Jesus is born. Shepherds, nobodies, from nowhere. Thugs. Love has come to us in Jesus Christ. It's not something we can brush aside. It's going to chase us our whole lives, and there's going to be opportunities at every single step of our lives to demonstrate the grace of God in the relationships that we have. When everyone's saying, shut the door, lock them up, don't forgive, Jesus is saying, no. Love. No cop-outs. No unforgivable sins. That's why Jesus came, for those who are fallen. To save us. Love has come in Christ. Let us love one another.